Hello, my name is Nicholas Dyack, and I'm here to give my presentation on Victory or Valhalla, Violence via Vikings Sampling in Acylum's Kampf den Verderb. What Disney's Pirates of the Caribbean film series did to rejuvenate interest in pirate culture, and Ridley Scott's Gladiator did for the sword and sandal genre, can be said of the History Channel's Viking series at catapulting Viking interest into greater pop culture limelight. The series, created in 2013 by Michael Hurst, has been critically successful, running for 6 seasons and producing over 80 episodes and generating an upcoming spin-off series, Vikings Valhalla, for Netflix. Now, Vikings may be one of the most relevant and visible depictions of Viking culture currently, but it's far from the only one. Other noteworthy instances of Viking myths appears in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which was released by Ubisoft across all major video game platforms in 2020, the comic book series Northlanders that ran for 50 issues, and of course, the extreme heavy metal subgenre Viking metal, which has had bands cranking out epic ballads since Bathory's 1990 opus Hammerheart. But this presentation will take a close look at another instance of Viking depiction in music, samples from the Vikings television show being used in the songs of German industrial band Acylum. This is of unique interest in that industrial music, aside from some niche subgenres, has little interest in pre-1900s history, opting instead to focus on more modern and postmodern concepts. Acylum uses these audio samples from the television series to invoke a sense of Vikingness to explore violent concepts. This presentation will explore how Acylum accomplishes this, and it will leverage Viking metal scholarship to do so, specifically that of Simon Trafford. Industrial music and Viking metal both have very distinct histories and subject matters of preference, but both can be considered extreme forms of music that congregate in the underground music scenes. Many of Trafford's Viking metal observations can be applied to industrial music. This presentation will also give a brief overview of what sampling is and how industrial artists deploy it in their songs. Now, Acylum is a German industrial dance band that was formed in 2004 by Pedro Engel and later joined by Nadine Engel. They can best be classified as an aggrotech project, a subgenre of industrial music that relies on aggressive, distorted vocals, pulsing, stomping dance beats, and oftentimes darker subject matter. The project has released 6 albums thus far, with Kampf den Verderb having been released in February of 2021, being their most current offering. One of the most valuable tools in the industrial artist's repertoire for pitting compositions is the act of sampling, which Acylum certainly engages in. Now, sampling in music comes in many forms. The first is the recording of sounds, also called field recordings, and playing them back in a song, oftentimes looped to create a beat or other audio effects. The second type is the sampling of another artist's music, oftentimes a beat or a hook, and incorporating that into a new composition. This is often seen in rap, hip-hop, disco, pop music, and other genres. The third form, the one most used by industrial artists, such as Acylum, as will be evident in this presentation, is the sampling of other audio media texts, films, TV series, video games, speeches, radio, news programs, and so on. These samples are inserted into a song to either play the role of lyrics or to bolster the artist's original lyrics in some capacity. This practice is indebted to the cut-up literary technique pioneered by William S. Burroughs and Brian Gysin, both whom have had a huge influence on the development of industrial music. Now, there are a variety of reasons why an industrial artist will incorporate samples into their work. The first is to engage in determinant, which is the act of turning words, symbols, and actions of authorities back on themselves recontextualized. The second reason is to create a linkage from the sample source to the song proper, bringing forth the scene's imagery, the characters, the mise-en-scene. The third reason is to harness the sounds, effects, tones, and moods of the source sample to complement the atmosphere of the song. There's also the creation of a hidden language, when an esoteric sample from a rare or scarce source is able to be identified by a listener. And finally, there's the harnessing of the text of the source, that what the characters are communicating is in alignment with what the songwriter is also conveying. Acylum's album, Kampf Verderb, contains many instances of sampling. 2 songs on the album feature prominent samples from the History Channel's Vanguard original series, Vikings, and they are Schwarzer Adler and Sieg oder Valhalla. Now, Schwarzer Adler is the 6th track on Kampf den Verderb. The track immediately begins with a sample of Ragnar describing the Blood Eagle process, taken from the 7th episode of Season 2 titled Blood Eagle.
What is a blood eagle? The offender gets down on his knees, and his back is open with knives. And then, with axes, his ribs are chopped away from his spine. And then his lungs pulled out of this huge bleeding wound and laid upon his shoulders, so they look like the folded wings of a great eagle.
Now, this sample is repeated again at the 3-minute 52-second mark. The lyrics of the song bolster the sample's described imagery, quote, "Skinned alive, your ribs are cracked," end quote. The song's title translates to Black Eagle and is fitting for the described imagery as well. In There Are No Boundaries for Our Boats, Vikings and the Westernization of the Norse Saga, Steve Nash dives into the Blood Eagle rite by leveraging Erika Sigurdsson's essay, Violence and Historical Authenticity, Rape and Pillage in Popular Viking Fiction. Quote, "There is certainly no lack of blood in Vikings, and Sigurdsson argues that this trend is linked to a certain authenticity with regard to critical perspectives of history, with directors, quote, using the notion of historical accuracy as a powerful justification for the depicted violence," end quote, end quote. Nash acknowledges that different translations and interpretations of the sagas yield different incarnations of the Blood Eagle with varying degrees of brutality, but concludes that since Vikings, quote, opts for the most violent rendition possible, gives credence to Sigurdsson's suggestion that extreme violence is a desirable quality in modern media representations of history, end quote. By hearing this sample describing the Blood Eagle, imagery is conjured up of the process proper at the episode's end when Ragnar performs the rite on Jarl Borg. Acylum is able to capitalize on this imagery to underscore their particular brand of lyrical violence with not only heightened gruesomeness, the aforementioned perceived desired quality, but implied authenticity as well. This act of sampling Vikings is rather innovative approach to achieving Vikingness in music. Turning to Viking metal scholarship, Simon Trafford observes that there is, quote, startling diversity, end quote, in the Viking metal scene due to the, quote, widely varying extents to which performers have chosen to make their music sound Viking, and the many ways in which, in the Bardwallardian absence of an original to emulate, have set about that task, end quote. Trafford offers that there is a spectrum to Viking metal, such as bands that play heavy metal to those that play traditional instruments. Regardless of where a band falls on the spectrum, quote, the primary burden of creating the Viking identity of Viking metal falls more often to other elements, namely to lyrics or to visual identity, end quote. By sampling the Blood Eagle dialogue, Acylum sets about to exhibit the same Vikingness that Viking metal bands commonly achieve by deploying other means. Now, Acylum continues the sampling process with the second track on the album, Sieg oder Valhalla, which was also released as a standalone digital single with a plethora of remixes from other industrial artists. The song opens at the 30-second mark with a sample of Ivar shouting,
"Who among you will follow me? Who will follow me
And this is taken from season 4, episode 20. The sample is reused at the song's conclusion at the 4-minute 45-second mark. A different sample appears at the 2-minute 30-second mark of Ragnar shouting,
Not you! Not you! Not you! And not you! They have all failed!
and this is taken from his I Am the King speech in season 3, episode 9. The song's title translates to Victory or Valhalla, with the German lyrics containing both Viking and Norse references with a peppering of nationalism. Quote, hate against hate, blood against blood, we fight, we storm, we don't waver, all father's power and homeland duty, end quote. The sample of Ivar asking his fellow men if they want to follow him in a battle is interesting in that the sample has 2 subjects and 2 speakers. In the context of the show Vikings, there's only Ivar and his men. By inserting the sample into the song, the dialogue does not come just from Ivar, but from the band Acylum as well. In addition, the you addressed in the sample simultaneously becomes the listener of the song. In an act of Schrödinger sampling, Ivar is addressing both his men and the listener. Acylum is addressing Ivar's men and the listener, and both entities are asking both sets of subjects to follow them into figurative and literal battles. Aside from these 3 samples spread across 2 songs on Kampf then Verderb, there's one more Viking element Acylum uses that needs to be factored in: the cover art for the Sieg oder Valhalla digital single. Viking metal bands often adorn their albums with artwork depicting northern landscapes and showcasing artifacts such as Thor's hammer and Sutton Hoo helmets. The cover of Sieg oder Valhalla shows the aftermath of a bloody battle with impaled bodies in the background and a shield and a Viking helmet in the foreground. The presence of the helmet puts the single in the same ballpark of other Viking metal albums, such as Hrosnagrani's Schattenkrieger, Amon Amaral's The Avenger, and Enslaved's Vikingler Veldi, all which feature a Sutton Hoo helmet. While Acylum uses samples from Vikings television show and has cover art akin to Viking metal album artwork, it does need to be noted that Vikingness is neither the band's identity or primary subject matter. Instead, the band is described as a, quote, barbarian electro duo, end quote, on their label's official Bandcamp page. And the background cover art of both Sieg oder Valhalla and Kampf den Verderb depicts impaled bodies, which is more akin to a barbaric practice than a Viking one, or in this case, very Vlad the Impaler-ish. Instead, Acylum uses the Viking samples as a way to explore violence. Violence is, of course, an important aspect of Viking metal. Simon Trafford describes Viking metal as having, quote, emphasis on excitement and fighting, end quote, that draws on, quote, popular Viking iconography, end quote, that places the, quote, most stress upon the violence, chaos, and danger, end quote, in Viking attributes of, quote, freedom, masculinity, adventure, and chaos, end quote. The major difference between Viking metal and Acylum's relationship to violence is heroism. Many of Viking metal lyrics showcase a heroic nature of Vikings and their battles, conquests, and gods. Acylum strips away all traces of heroism and leaves only violence, specifically first-person perspective violence. A look at lyrical excerpts from other songs on Kampf den Verderb demonstrates a lack of heroism. In Hunter, we have, we're hunting humans, we hunt you, I can't control this feeling, I'm the hunter. In Fire, we have, how long can you stand the pain? I can't control myself. Without emotions, I see the flames, I must hurt you. And in Violin of Death, we have a bullet in the back of the head. This is a violent scene of death. Listen up, a violin plays the song of death. Alpha Matrix, Acylum's label, highlights the violent nature of Kampf den Verderb as a selling point, hearkening back to the previous statement of violence and authenticity as a desired quality in historic epics. Quote, Acylum drags us one more time on the battlefield and brings us close to the overall bloody atmosphere of hatred, violence, terror, and war, end quote. And, quote, our daily orgy of violence and cowardice translated and distilled through boiling synth machines, oppressive, mostly German vocal samples, and aggressive, distorted vocals, end quote. With Acylum's fascination of violence, what are they trying to say by exploring it? In the realm of Viking metal, Simon Trafford states that, quote, Vikings have been appropriated, created, and manipulated to serve modern needs and negotiate present-day anxieties, end quote. Viking metal proper creates a, quote, desired other, a more or less invented medieval that has characteristics felt to be absent in the modern world and that are therefore the object of yearning, end quote. Acylum is certainly exploring modern day anxieties, which they state on their social media and Bandcamp pages, and their commentary rests in that gray area that veers dangerously close to the taboo and possibly right-wing. For example, the Bandcamp description for Sieg oder Valhalla states, quote, victory or Valhalla. That was the motto 1,000 years ago, says Pedro Engel. Today, it's even more truer than ever. We all get pushed into corners when we don't want to stand. Opinions get imposed on us even when we don't share them. So there's nothing, end quote. Quote, so there's nothing left for us to do but switch to attack mode and follow the steps of our ancestors, end quote, adds Nadine Kuraz, Engel, holding her fist in the air. COVID-19 sentiments can be read between the lines in this promotional description. This is further bolstered by a March 28th Facebook post describing the album as a soundtrack for the quarantine with a winking emoji, and a March 3rd post that describes the song Masquerade as a COVID-19 song with a shush emoji. A lyrical excerpt of Masquerade reads, overdose life, psychos the whole world, selfish everywhere, animals are dying, censorship permanent, COVID-19. At first glance, this doesn't sound so bad. The acknowledgement of animals dying seems to imply a recognition of climate change and its environmental impact. And on the other hand, decrying censorship is a dog whistle that alt-right personalities proclaim while appearing on popular television programs while having their opinions printed in syndicated news columns. Acylum do not overtly proclaim their political leanings. Their music is multifaceted and can be taken in different contexts. However, their lyrical and musical violent reaction to the COVID-19 pandemic, as expressed in Kampf Verderb and underscored via Viking sampling, is crystal clear.